I like to look at very simple things for life lessons, like the work of Shell, the giving tree, the beautiful cooperation that exists between two things, nature and a human. Early in the story, the boy is delighted to be around the tree. He swings and plays and gives back, shows love. Then he gets older and caught up in the hype, sees no value in play, just wants some money so that he can do what people do. The tree gives him apples to sell. He doesn't visit for a while, comes back later and wants all of those things that give people security, wants a house and a family. The tree gives him her branches. He doesn't visit for a while, comes back later and just wants to get away from it all. The tree gives him her trunk. This is a tragedy. The boy cuts down her trunk, makes a boat, and sails away. The tree is happy, but not really. At the end, the boy grows old and just wants a place to rest. The tree is happy to give herself one last time. The boy doesn't consciously learn his lesson, takes no responsibility for his selfishness, and the tree is satisfied just to have him there. Giving is a beautiful phenomenon. It's actually one that we can observe physiologically. Giving requires some sort of sacrifice. One simple example of this is giving to charity. In the 2006 study by Malin Grafman, researchers used functional magnetic resonance imaging to track the neural mechanisms that operate during charitable donations. Why is this research important? Because it might tell us something about what motivates self-sacrificial behavior. Participants were given $128 and chose to endorse or oppose societal causes by anonymous decisions to donate or refrain from donating to real charitable organizations, or ORGs. The $128 would decrease depending on how often they made altruistic choices. In a single trial, the name and mission statement of a charitable organization, or ORG, was presented, followed by the payoff type. This is the decision phase, and then by the outcome phase. Depending on the trial, yes or no decisions to different payoff types had different monetary consequences to the participant and or the ORG. The experimental conditions of interest, defined on the basis of participants' yes or no decisions to different payoff types, were pure monetary reward on the far right, non-costly donations, you don't lose any money, but the charity gains money, non-costly opposition, the charity doesn't gain money and you lose money, costly donations, you lose money and the charity gains money, costly opposition, you lose money and the charity doesn't gain money. Altruistic choices are operationalized as costly donations and costly oppositions. Note that a costly opposition qualifies as an altruistic act. This is because one opts for losing money to avoid contributing to a cause believed to be unjust. The midbrain ventral tegmental area, or VTA, the dorsal striatum and the ventral striatum were activated by both pure monetary rewards and decisions to donate. This system is commonly referred to as the VTA striatum mesolimbic network and is responsible for regulating reward reinforcement and prediction. The results suggest that donating to societal causes and earning money share anatomical systems of reward reinforcement and expectancy. In simple terms, the mesolimbic reward system is engaged by donations in the same way as when monetary rewards are obtained. The mesolimbic system regulates overall reward reinforcement and prediction and is activated by a host of stimuli, including food, sex, drugs, and money. Should we be worried that charitable gestures reduce to the same activity? But another neural mechanism was activated. The subgenual area, comprising the most posterior sector of the medial orbitofrontal cortex and the ventral cingulate cortex, was activated during decisions to donate. This is for costly and non-costly donations. The subgenual area plays key roles in more primitive mechanisms of social attachment and aversion. It also plays a key role in the release of neuromodulators oxytocin and vasopressin. Further, the subgenual cortex and adjacent septal structures are activated when humans look at their own babies and romantic partners. It's interesting to note that more anterior sectors of the prefrontal cortex are distinctively recruited when altruistic choices prevail over selfish material interests. During difficult, costly decisions, effects were observed in the anterior prefrontal cortex, including the frontopolar cortex and the medial frontal gyrus, and in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. The fact that anterior prefrontal sectors are recruited by costly decisions indicates that when complex contingencies are involved, for example, when immediate self-interest and moral beliefs are at odds, altruistic decisions entail more complex event-outcome associations. So what does this all show? That we're decent but selfish people? Selfishly considerate? Considerately selfish? At first it seems to indicate that when we're being charitable, maybe we're evaluating payoffs, just in the same way when we engage in other reward behaviors. But social attachment and cognitive control are also involved. So, when we're being charitable, we are being selfish, but also socially considerate and rational. But you have to choose just one, right? If you want to be a universal ethical egoist, yes, you believe that everyone ought to always serve his or her own interests. Everyone ought to do what will maximize one's own expected utility, even if it requires harming others. It's utilitarianism reduced to the pinpoint of the single individual ego. Ayn Rand argues that selfishness is a virtue and altruism is a vice. That altruism is parasitic and destructive because it undermines the individual's worth. Rand says if a man accepts the ethics of altruism, his first concern is not how to live his life, but how to sacrifice it. Altruism erodes men's capacity to grasp the value of an individual life. It reveals a mind from which the reality of a human being has been wiped out. Rand's argument seems to have the following structure. Number 1. The perfection of one's own abilities in a state of happiness is the highest goal for humans, and we have a moral duty to attempt to reach this goal. 2. The ethics of altruism prescribes that we sacrifice our interests and lives for the good of others. 3. Therefore, the ethics of altruism is incompatible with the goal of happiness. 4. Ethical egoism prescribes that we seek our own happiness exclusively, and as such, it is consistent with the happiness goal. 5. Therefore, ethical egoism is the correct moral theory. This is a classic example of a false dilemma. Either we have absolute altruism or absolute egoism, but nothing in between. Even if altruism is not required as a duty, it may still be permitted, and it may still help to achieve one's own selfish goals. Additionally, as we saw in the neuroscience study, altruism and egoism may not be mutually exclusive. Think about love your neighbor as yourself. Self-interest is compatible with other regarding motivation. Let's look at 3 criticisms of ethical egoism. People like Rand and Nietzsche publicized egoism, but when you publicize ethical egoism, you let the cat out of the bag. You put forth a universal prescription for egoism, and this is not something that would be in the egoist's self-interest. It'd be better for him, for all of us to be altruists, while he keeps his principle private. The egoist should publicly advocate traditional morality, so that society doesn't break down, but privately have the opposite view. This puts one in moral isolation. The egoist may not even be able to reveal his true motives to his children. Could the egoist ever really have friends, or be in love, just share a sandwich? These are deep human values, and they bring much happiness. What is necessary for deep friendship and love? A good friend is one who is not always preoccupied with his own self-interests, one who forgets about himself, at least sometimes, to serve or enhance another person's interests. If you, as an egoist, decide you want friendship, you can't have friendship because of this necessary condition. So to reach this selfish goal of friendship, you have to give up egoism and become, to a certain extent, altruistic. The final criticism is that ethical egoism is not just permissible, it is morally required or demanded. And to help others is not only not required, but also morally wrong. If I can save a bunch of kittens by pressing a button, and there is nothing for me to gain from doing it, then it is morally wrong. In the past, linking ethics to evolution required the misuse of survival of the fittest as a law of nature. This has sometimes been done in order to justify might makes right. But there is another view, that the animal kingdom survives via cooperation, which is at least as important as competition. The group or the species is as important as the individual. Whether we're talking about the species, population, group, individual, or gene, behavior can be determined by evolutionarily stable strategies. These are obviously not conscious. If we're talking about the gene's eye view, for example, morality done right is just an evolutionarily stable strategy to promote successful gene replication. Let's take a look at birds that groom to see how biological altruism and evolutionarily stable strategies work. Because birds don't have hands and parasites get on them, they need mutual grooming. There are those birds that groom others, these are called suckers by Dawkins, and those that present themselves but don't groom, these are called cheaters. In a population of suckers, a cheater will thrive, but when the suckers will become too few, the cheaters die off as well. Then there are grudgers. Grudgers groom all and only those that reciprocate the grooming. They groom each other and suckers, but not the cheaters. In fact, once caught, a cheater is marked forever. The grudgers are like reciprocal altruists, who have a rational morality based on cooperative self-interest. The interesting question here is, what are our duties to those that attempt to manipulate us? Do we have a duty to serve them, just like those that cooperate? Do we have a special responsibility to those that cooperate? Martin Luther once said that humanity is like a man who, when mounting a horse, always falls off on the opposite side, especially when he tries to overcompensate for his previous exaggerations. We overcompensate for being the sucker by becoming the cheater and falling off the other side, substituting being irrational and guilt-ridden for becoming self-absorbed and robbing ourselves of our deepest joys. We need to get on the horse by avoiding both extremes.